Ja, herzlich willkommen zurück zu unserer letzten Session des Tages. Und now I have to start speaking in English, otherwise our two guests won't understand me. I think the German is, well, I don't know. We're still in the training, let's say it this way. So I'm very happy to introduce Illya Azaroff and Rosie Paul. I will give a little intro to you a bit later. Talking about our SHIFT initiative today. SHIFT is an initiative we started last year, and I'm very happy to have Illya and Rosie here with us today because they were ambassadors from the first second on. The moment I asked them or we told them about the idea, they didn't really ask a lot of questions. I don't know, Illya, if you remember, we met in Baku at the COP and I said, hey, I have an idea, we need to do something. Like, yeah, I'm in. So I was like, wow, that is so easy. And I think with Rosie, with you, it was very similar. So I'm very happy to have both of you here. Maybe for our audience, for all of you who have not heard about SHIFT yet, first of all, hopefully you will check the website now. And SHIFT is basically, it's a global initiative. I think that is quite important, especially in these days, to collaborate internationally. And the core question of SHIFT is, what is a good, sustainable, modern architecture of the future? And I think we've seen a lot of building activity, especially in the countries of the global north, such as Germany, Europe, but as well in the US. And we've seen how it spreads around the world, this maybe one-fits-all architecture. We see way too much. We see steel, concrete, glass, towers, which don't really work in their climate zone, and then we need an air conditioning to make it work. And that was the idea where we brought together like-minded people like Illya and Rosie, where we said we need to change something. We need to change that image of modern architecture, and we need to have that discussion, and we have to understand that maybe we kind of need to learn from countries who are used to having extreme climate, who are used to build naturally, regional, who have a more craftsman approach to buildings, and especially passive solutions on how to deal with the heat and very extreme temperatures. And that is the core idea of SHIFT, to bring together the right people, but as well to shape that image of architecture. So we have established a website. We just selected the first SHIFT projects. You can go to the website, which we have curated with an international jury. And we're doing a series of events. We kicked off last year in Paris with an internal workshop, and then we did the official global launch during the Architectural Biennale in Venice. And I'm very excited that we go to India this year. So Rosie is already getting ready that we need to organize a SHIFT event in India, and everyone who wants to get involved and get engaged, please visit our website. So that is maybe a little bit the context, the advertisement for SHIFT. And now I'd like to hand over to Illya. Like I said, Illya is the current president of the American Institute of Architects. I think I need to ask him afterwards a little bit about the political environment, because I think we're all very curious on how does someone like Illya, who's really been an advocate for sustainable architecture, who's been working internationally in the Caribbean, I think in Turkey you've been supporting the country with the earthquake challenges and risks they're having. So really like a very international, sustainable architect, maneuvering this in these times and to keep the topic alive. So I'm very happy, Illya, that you made the time and that you're with us today. And now I'm excited for your presentation, so the floor is yours.
Great. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity today and the kind presentation. I think I'm happy to answer those questions that you began to pose. And but to start off, it's just really great to be here. It's really an honor to be part of SHIFT and be a global ambassador for this extraordinarily important work. You know, together we have to really work hard to secure this collective future that we're striving for. And just a bit about myself, I appreciate the kind introduction. I am the current president of the American Institute of Architects, so I'll talk about that just for a brief moment. But I'm also an architect, an educator, and a geographer. My work is all over the world with learning from the global south and some of the great things that are happening out there in the world that we bring into the work in my office. Just 2 slides about the AIA. Really, today, with this hat, that I'll wear for just a brief moment. The AIA is it's over 101,000 members in 120 countries. So the organization is a global organization. And as the president, I'm pushing very hard to ensure this work about a shift gets into the hands of our members so we can have greater impact. This is the type of work we need to have, whether it's in small communities, such as this one in Louisiana, to some of our international components in Hong Kong, or any place all across the world in the Middle East. And that's one hat that I wear, the advocate for this work among the membership of my organization. And the good news is there are many that are already doing this work. We just want to bring more people along. In my own office, we really work hard across the world to make sure that we bring more hands to this essential work, that increasing voice and visibility for underserved communities is really our ethos. But I do want to talk a little bit about why, because I think really it was interesting. The Shift team asked, why are you a global ambassador? So I had to think about that. My why I'm dedicated to this work is about dreams and family. Now, listen, many of you in the audience, you grew up with seeing the future as a vast horizon or a possibility for the future that is beyond what our children see or our grandchildren see. Those are my two sons on the right side of the slide, and there's me with the ice cream cone on the left side of the slide, looking into the camera, thinking about a future. But when I talk to my sons and their friends and their cohorts, they do not see a future that is bright or endless. That horizon is very near. So we have to secure the future for the next 7 generations. We have to look at what that might mean for them through our work. We have to clearly shift to make a better impact. So some of the work that we do here is forming great partnerships. This is one of our clients, Diane. She's taking the first swing at the house that her father and grandfather built. We also have to do things that perhaps architects and engineers are not comfortable with. We have to do whatever it takes to work with communities through catastrophic disruptions, for example, to embrace the idea of community in a different way as we bring it into our designs. To create a regenerative design really embraces social, ecological, and unique characteristics. That is the shift that we espouse in the office. In fact, there's been some great successes, especially in the global South. Some of the work that I do in the Pacific and the Caribbean, we have received accolades and been accepted into many communities. But in this journey, we have had to learn a couple of things. One, we are all in the same storm, but we're not all in the same boat. We have to have a shift to understand what the global South can teach us, what leadership looks like when we co-design together. Because I believe, and I have seen, that we are all in the same storm. We're enduring shocks and stresses from hurricanes and tornadoes and typhoons, from tropical storms that we see unfolding across the earth, flooding and drought that is common in every part of the world today. And we need to address resource stresses as well as political upheaval, and understand that earthquakes are serving to be the disruptors of displacement at a massive scale, with loss of housing and infrastructure, loss of community and livelihood. And it's not just those disruptions, it's the chronic events that are increasingly more common, placing millions of more vulnerable people around the world at risk. This is my own neighborhood. After maybe 6 centimeters of rain in a very short amount of time, it floods because of the infrastructure, because of the change in the weather patterns. So this is the storm that we are all in. To get in the same boat, we must make a shift, because every minute of every day, 24 people are displaced around the world. From here where I'm sitting in New York City to wherever you're sitting, displacement is real. And it happens because of the choices we've made in the past. That is our shift. In 2025 alone, 117 million people were displaced at a cost of $327 billion US in reported losses. So the climate crisis is a human crisis. That is the boat we are in, and that's what we share. And this is the face of some of those folks that have been displaced. These are some of the 117 million people displaced. These are some of the students that I had met after the earthquakes in Turkey in 2023. Many of them lost family members. Many of them now are in resource stress. And we need to help not just them, but the others around the world that need our co-design, our thoughts, and our help. If we do not make this an effort, a serious effort to shift, in 2050, this is what our future holds, that we'll be looking at 200 million people displaced around the world in a single year. That is an incredible number. And with a shift, creating sustainable, regenerative, resilient communities, we can change this story. I also believe what I've learned from the Global South in particular, that we have to come to terms with answering the question of how do we heal versus cure. Curing is removing a symptom in your design choices, whereas healing makes a community whole again through the act of design and community engagement. That is the shift in how we do our work. That healing versus curing is what we've termed in our office as a regenerative design shift. This future that we look at, we need to build holistic communities that can adapt to a hotter, wetter world with biodiversity and carrying capacity increasing, embracing culture and heritage as the foundations of the work that we do. So this is the ethos we subscribe to. Resilience and sustainability are two sides of the same coin. In the middle of that coin are ecosystem services, culture. That is our regenerative process. If we use that as the same coin and we deposit that, we really secure a future for those next 7 generations. And it must be said that the shift is recognizable after these disruptions. That is when rules no longer apply, and we have the opportunity to work with communities to understand what a future looks like, not just in terms of their architecture, but in terms of the holistic thinking of their community. So some of the work that we've done at the smallest scale, this is how we've applied this in the US. And I wanted to bring a couple of US examples because this idea of sustainability and the drive for a better future has not changed. And I'm looking forward to talking a little bit more about that. So this is one of our projects we just completed in Massachusetts. This is called the Cranberry House. It is a regenerative house that is inside of a very fragile ecosystem. The client wanted a disaster durable home that he and his wife could age in place and also shelter in place in case tropical storms, coastal conditions hit this area, which they do from time to time. So we suggested to work on a nature-positive regenerative solution that incorporates bio-based materials, ecosystem services, resilient building measures, and sustainable practices. When I said a fragile ecosystem, this is in the middle of a bird sanctuary that the owner has property right at the edge. And he has extended this fragile ecosystem into his property in terms of restoration of the wetlands. This was part of our work, that restoration of wetlands and bird sanctuary. But what we also did is understood the cultural conditions of the heritage architecture in the area. These are called cranberry sorting houses that were made before the advent of electricity, and they would orient the building as well as capture sunlight from the very first morning light until the very end of the day to extend hours of working in terms of sorting cranberries and other agricultural elements. So we took that on as part of our design elements when we moved forward. What we also did in the restoration of those wetlands is we took all of the degraded areas, harvested out the diseased trees, as well as found trees that were in the footprint of the new building. And we had all of that material milled on the site and seasoned for 2 years prior to building the house. So we regenerated by clearing and restoring wetlands, but also using that material. So the final piece of this project, this is a disaster durable home. It has many, many accolades, as well as being a passive house. It goes beyond net zero. It's regenerated the ecosystems around it. And by way of the house, it is also regenerating with the nature positive solutions, bringing back some of the ecosystems that were displaced. It also does meet the client's age in place threshold, as well as this adaptivity for the future. But this is small scale. We've taken that to the larger scale, understanding that this is a new project that I'm just going to show you one slide. We were just awarded this with MAP Architects in New York City. This will be the first bio-based regenerative 600-unit apartment building mixed use in New York City. And we won this through a competition with the city of New York, noting that being a regenerative beyond net zero, actually nature positive, is something the city has never seen. Stay tuned for more of this work as we move forward. We've kicked off this project and we're excited about the eco restoration of the riverine system that is a major part of this. We're using bio-based panels for the facade systems and some of these other elements that are extraordinarily important. But I don't want to miss the opportunity to talk about what was mentioned, learning from the Global South. This is some of the work we've done in the Caribbean and listening and learning from the community, noting that they have solutions that are thousands of years in practice that align with ecosystems and nature that allow us to become better architects. And so a lot of the work that we've done, learning from the Global South, has presented itself in some of the resilience hubs on small island communities, community centers and cultural regenerative centers that are up and running. This is a new one that has broken ground in Hawaii with Native Hawaiians. And this is based on their va'a. It's a structure that is really the community gathering space, but it also really harkens back to their canoe, a va'a that is something you travel the world with. And when you come to islands, you use that canoe for shelter and the basis of starting new life for your community. So we've used a lot of these elements from the Global South, but we marry that with science and technology. So we often say indigenous wisdom plus science and technology brings us to that answer. What is the architecture of the 21st century? Relying on that indigenous wisdom is something we can no longer set aside. It is essential to our work. And then, of course, understanding what technologies in energy production and ecosystem restoration looks like. That also brings us to this idea of who else is on your team. Traditionally, it's fellow architects and engineers and maybe financiers. In our case, we bring on spiritual liaisons, horticulturalists, native healers, sometimes reef restoration specialists, archaeologists, cultural leaders, and artists that we understand what that value system is to really bring in the indigenous wisdom to create architecture that is 21st century. If we do that collectively, we will secure the future for not just these kids, but my kids, my children, your nieces, your nephews, your grandchildren. So with that, that's a little introduction. And the third hat that I wear, I would be remiss to use that third or miss that third hat. I'm also an educator. I teach at the City University of New York, City Tech campus, and these are my current students, some of them thesis students, very interested in this exact work. So with that, thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Illya. It's always very inspiring, and I love this, listening to people and really having like that social focus on architecture and learning. So I think that it gives us some food for thought and something we will discuss after our next introduction. So I'm happy now to introduce Rosie Paul. Like I said before, she is an architect located in India. She used to be the head architect of the Auroville Earth Institute. I have been to Auroville. I don't know, so Rosie, if I've ever told you. It's a very interesting place in India. You've been very active in different roles, and you're very like an advocate for sustainable architecture. You're as well active with Architecture 2030 out of the US. That's how we met. So I'm very happy that you're here, and the floor is yours.
Hello everyone. I'm very happy to be here as well. Illya, let me just start off by saying it's such a pleasure listening to you, and I wish we could just have the entire time just listening to everything you have to say. And I think you said it right, you are an educator and you will continue to be. So hello everyone, I'm Rosie. I'm a principal architect and co-founder of a studio here in India called Masons Inc. Studio. We are a studio focused on sustainability, heritage conservation, and social architecture. So this session is about shift, and I'm so glad that there's this initiative that's going around telling people the right things about sustainability. And being a global ambassador for shift, I'm glad that I get to speak to you all to let you know my perspective on why shift is important and why it's important right now and right here, and why we need more and more people to advocate for it and start saying the right things when it comes to sustainability. So I think along the way, some trends that are happening right now is that sustainability has become something that people talk about often, but also with that comes the misfortune of the fact that the term is being used, overused, misused, and misunderstood. So today I wanted to use the time that I have to kind of simplify it down into a few guiding principles that we use when we approach architecture or heritage conservation or anything, when we have to kind of advise on how to build on a given site, and also why these guiding principles are also guiding principles of shift as well. So without further ado, I will share my screen. And yeah, this time I'm trying to keep it simple. I won't be going too much into the projects, but more into these principles and how we use them. Can you see my screen?
Yeah, now we do. Yeah.
All right. So, like I said, I'm Rosie Paul from Masons Inc. And when speaking about a project, I think very often architects, what we tend to do is look at the site and see what the site can do for the building. Um, Although that is necessary, what we feel is it is also good to change the lens of seeing and seeing what the building can do for the site as well. So what I mean by that is looking into, our resources, the local resources that are available, also the human resources around that site, and seeing if the way we build or our design can bring about positive impact or low impact when it comes to the resources available on the site. Context and culture is everything. And I think that's important to understand when we are working in different geographical locations. I think that's where we somewhat went wrong when we were learning from the global north, probably, not understanding that it's not okay to just pick up something and place it anywhere, and one building cannot cannot be the answer to every place that you are building in. So context means everything. So when we build here in India, something that we try and do is leverage the culture and context of the place. So when it comes to India, we have a lot of informal labor on site because we have a lot of migrant populations moving around from state to state. And fortunately or unfortunately, the construction industry is the second largest employer when it comes to India. So what we try and do on our sites is also try and see if we can make our sites site schools where we are training and capacity building these people as well. So since we are working in sustainable materials and looking at alternate materials, it's also kind of promoting green livelihoods and training them in ways in which we can build better. Skilling and upskilling, like this kind of takes on from what I was saying earlier, where in India we have a lot of opportunity to train the people that are working on your site. So what we do is not only do we skill them in alternate construction techniques, but we also look at what are the dying skills that are happening because of the overuse of industrialized materials. So a lot of traditional knowledge and skill are getting depleted and dying. And though when we speak to our laborers on site, we understand that they have a memory of working with natural materials or whatever, but they've forgotten the technique, or they've kind of forgotten certain aspects of it, which are important aspects to provide a durable, sustainable structure. So we work on those skills that are forgotten but still existing, and kind of bring back the memory of traditional construction. Going local. Another thing that we find is a good thing to kind of have is locating and understanding the local crafts available on or around your on your site, and seeing if your building can become a platform to showcase those projects, thereby promoting those livelihoods as well. So what you see on the left is the basket weaving skill that was around in the area that we were building, and on the right is how we've incorporated that into certain aspects of the building. This one is a very special one for me, and I think an important one is to celebrate inherent craftsmanship. So something that's been happening a lot around the world, I think, is traditional craft and skill dying, as I was saying earlier, because of the overuse of industrialized materials. These traditional crafts and traditional artisans are depleting, which is in turn increasing the costs and making it uneconomical to use traditional techniques like using lime plasters, using bamboo. All of them become slightly more expensive in terms of labor. So what we try and do is also look at how we can import skill versus importing materials. So what I mean by that is very simply that in this example, you see the person in this photo on the left. He is a lime artisan and has developed this skill and this skill has been moving in his family from generation to generation. And there are many like him, some skilled in lime plastering, some skilled in earthen construction. There are different kind of generational skills that are now dying. And how we believe that we can kind of encourage these kind of skills is exchange expertise, exchange knowledge, and bring in these experts to the sites where it can be applicable and relevant. So here we are on this site in Tamil Nadu, being trained by an artisan from Rajasthan in lime plastering, so that we can deliver good resistant lime plasters for our buildings in South India. So in turn, what's happening is he is training the local community we are working with in lime plastering, and hence the skill and the expertise can kind of spread, and there's more of the good things everywhere in terms of construction and artisans. Localizing the supply chain, going as local as possible. And I think that's in turn what sustainability is about. Keeping aside all the jargon that we use, I think these simple principles really come in handy if we just think about it in a very simple way. This is trying to see what can the site that I have provide me that I can use, and then if that is not possible, then just looking at the near 5 kilometers and then really being strict about it, right? Like thinking about every the further you go, you put restrictions and you make informed decisions on how far you're going. So the material palette really comes from what the site gives you. So for the example that I have on the slide, this is a site that is located in Andhra Pradesh. It's a state in India, where stone is more easily available than anything else, and there is a stone quarry very close to site. So here what we wanted to try and do is try and see if we can use the waste stone. So in quarries, there's a lot of waste stone that comes out that usually goes into landfill because they're irregular and unsized, and seeing how we can either use it entirely or mix it up with about 20% of size stone to see whether it can become a viable construction material. And this is a really important one, is to learn. I think Illya had also mentioned it in his slides where he spoke about indigenous wisdom. And, I'd like to also say that learning from vernacular intelligence is is important, and it is not to be ignored, but to be inspired from, to learn from it, and to see whether the way they used to build is applicable in the way we build now. And also understanding that earlier things were extremely local and extremely climate responsive. So even though the climate is changing, it might require some innovation, but it in no way means that we ignore it completely and invent something that really doesn't make sense in the place you're in. So what you're seeing on the slide here is, on the right-hand side, is a vernacular traditional home. And just from looking at it, I know that this home is located in a place with very heavy rainfall, but also the deep verandas tell me that it probably has very hot summers as well. And using that same kind of logic when it comes to where we're building, which was in a similar kind of location, where you see that on the left-hand side is one of our projects where we've kind of incorporated similar strategies of deep verandas and high plinths. That's about it. So just very simple, easy guiding principles to kind of make sure that you're doing good for the planet. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think it's not so easy, I can tell you. In Germany, we have like a big movement, it's kind of like simple building, and it takes a lot of energy for people to really think about the new simplicity, or what you showed, using what's available on site. I would say in Germany or in Europe, we talk about circular design then. So I think it's, for you, maybe it's something you're like, that is, like simple design strategies. But I think, at least in the global north, that's really, it's kind of hard work, to make that mind shift and to make that shift in design and what it means then for the architecture, where now, we see a lot of renderings and then it comes to life somehow. But to think about it the other way around, I think is a very interesting and a very important way of designing and thinking about space. But it's, I would say, not easy for everyone. So thank you very much. And I hope, Illya, we have you as well on board. I just don't, now there you are. So maybe a few questions. Maybe Rosie, first to you, because I said, we're planning on coming to India in June. And when we had the discussion, where are we going to India? We're going to Bengaluru. And then there was the idea we go to Delhi. And then we heard from many people, it's like, no, you cannot go in June to Delhi. It is so hot that, no one is there. And, at least, what we hear is like the effects of climate change, of, higher temperature in India. Is that something where sustainability, or where, people start to shift and think about the topic differently? Or is it, I don't know, they just try to live with it and, continue as before, like in the mainstream architectural discussion? I
think climate change in that sense forces you to think differently. Apart from the temperature increase, we also have, if you're talking about Delhi, we also have bad air quality. We have a lot of things that, of course, there are many things that factors that result in all of these issues. But I think it's sort of a rude wake-up call that kind of forces you to see if we're doing if we need to change some things, or if we need to think differently. But I think the gap right now is that even today, the connection is not almost obvious. I don't think a lot of architects feel that they can make a difference to climate change. They can be a strong player in the role in climate action. And I feel that there needs to be more of these initiatives. So that's why Shift needs to come in loud and strong, saying that, hey, the construction industry has a very huge role to play in the emissions, and not only the architects. Like Illya said, it needs to be cross-disciplinary. Everyone who's involved needs to come together, and international collaboration as well, because the issues that we're facing here in India, there are many places all around the globe that are facing the same things. So if we can actually get together and talk about it and do and learn from the good, somehow the bad things or the not so logical things we picked up very easily. So I think the challenge is to just pick up the right things and share that amongst everyone.
Yeah, I think that is a very good point. A little bit philosophical, I think, at one point. Why are always like the bad things, like the bad habits, so easily, spread around the world? And then when you want to do something good, you need to make the case for it. You need to advocate for it. I mean, we always have that discussion, and you should prove the business case. And no one asked that from someone who's just doing, bad architecture, bad quality. So. Maybe that shift, Illya, to you, I already said it before. I mean, you're the president of the AIA, you're very political somehow in that role, I would assume. And so many times in the past weeks when I heard the news, I'm like, I need to ask Illya how he's doing and how he sees things. Because, there's such, apparently, at least what we hear, such a pushback on climate protection, on climate activism in the US. How do you navigate that? Is that something, I mean, you showed like 100,000 members or more all over the world. I mean, what do your members say? I mean, for so many architects, that must be a very strange time at the moment.
It is. Thanks for the question. And it is an unfortunate time that the idea of multilateralism and this idea of how we are advancing towards a better world is set aside by personal interest in the political realm. So our members are not only dedicated and committed, we have a framework for design excellence that is very much in alignment with SHIFT. And every one of our members, to be a member of the AIA, you are agreeing to create a resilient, sustainable, healthy and equitable project, every project that you touch. And so our members are dedicated to this work. The challenges that are coming forward, you just illuminated some of them. Some of the support that we receive, whether it's tax credits for energy, for low-income housing, whatever it may be, those are being set aside for making it more difficult for projects to be achieved in its more traditional sort of funding streams. So what do architects do in times of disruption? Well, if the rules no longer apply, we are trying to create new pathways to achieve the projects that are necessary to improve society. It's more difficult. So the road is more difficult, but the dedication is not lessened. It's actually become more vibrant. Members are getting much more involved in the advocacy side to their local representatives and ensuring that we have our voices heard and a pathway forward for those communities that need it the most. It was very encouraging going to COP30 in Brazil. There were officially no U.S. involvement. However, the governors of many of the states came and talked about how the economy has transformed, that sustainability is an absolute must for advancing economies throughout the entire United States because of how we produce things, how we operate, all of those elements. And they proved that these disruptions cannot hold back the better choice between not being sustainable versus being sustainable. The return on investment and the investment banking system has already recognized the value of that. So that's good news, that even though you hear the rhetoric that these states, the governors that are investing in their infrastructure and how we operate, has not only pathway forward, there is a momentum that cannot be stopped. It's being slowed down, but it can't be stopped. So I'm optimistic because I'm very stubborn and I want to make sure that we do achieve this shift for the reasons that I put forward. But I'm happy to talk more about that, Christine. Call anytime, Christine. I've got it's always on my mind as well.
Yeah, I guess I will. Like I said, there's so many things you hear like that cannot be. But yeah, I agree. I think the project you in the end teased a little bit, like in New York, I guess. So it moves more now to the state level or to the city level where things are happening. And because, in Germany, you hear a lot of rumors and like, US, they don't do these things anymore. ESG is not important anymore. Sustainability is not important anymore. So maybe just to emphasize that that is not the case everywhere, right?
Nope. We're dedicated to this work, and we are not going to step away from those commitments. Not at all. As architects, no.
Okay, that's very, very good to hear. And Rosie, how is this whole, ESG, or I don't know if that is kind of like, I think your clients are normally not investors or like big companies, but do you have any conversations? How do you try to make that shift kind of outside of our bubble? Because every time I think we meet as a group of Shift, we all agree, which is always very nice. We have a lot of fun, but in order to change something, we need to have as well the inconvenient conversations. Is there space for it in India from your perspective or from your practical experience?
I think definitely there is space for these kind of conversations. As I was saying, the double-edged sword is that sustainability is the trend now, and everyone's talking about it. It just means that more people have to be talking about the right kind of sustainability, and that's what we need to work towards. So that would mean, even industrial companies kind of promoting the right thing. And I think that is sometimes it's easy, but not that's something that we probably need to figure out. But when it comes to how do we kind of speak to not speak to the same crowd, but how do we kind of simplify things? So I think that's where we come from in our role, because we speak to a lot of students about what true sustainability is. We speak to a lot of communities that need to understand climate change and climate action. So it's not really at the industrial level, but it's more at the grassroots level, and it's important for them to understand as well. As India has a large amount of people who are going to shift from, living in, they say the local term is kacha houses, which is mainly informal housing, into pakka houses, which is formal housing. But it's important for them to know that a good house does not mean letting go of, the materials that they were used to using, and how just a little bit of, I think Illya said that combining science and technology to indigenous wisdom. And I think that's what's important, because otherwise what we end up losing is all of this vernacular intelligence that exists, but has been termed as an informal house. And then the formal house becomes a concrete cube, which does not respond to the climate, which stands irrespective of the flood or whatever, but or the earthquake. But what's important is that the people survive and the people can live in it, and all of these things. So I think that's where it comes in, and that's what we're working towards, kind of bringing it at the grassroots level, right, and making them understand in their language. So it was very interesting that in one of these conversations we were having, there was someone who was explaining that just a simple concept of climate change, right? And explaining that it could be also explained as, the example was very nice, where she spoke about, she was talking to a community, and she said, when your children have a fever and it's an increase of 1 degree, you panic. But then, that's something that you need to think of. Why are you not bothered when the planet is having it? And, it was such an interesting, simple analogy. And I think sometimes when you're speaking to a different community with a different background, with not really the kind of knowledge or the scientific knowledge that you're speaking out of, you need to learn how to kind of speak in language that they understand. And I think these things we're learning as well on how to make everyone understand. So that's something, I think that's the work that we have ahead of us, that even to the industries and to the other architects or other stakeholders that are not really on board, finding the right kind of language and finding what works. And I think, Christine, you were also talking about that in Venice last time we met, how you need to speak the right language to the right person to whoever the audience is. And I think that's the work we have ahead of us.
Yeah, and I think maybe coming to one thing I remember very clearly as well from the project you presented in Paris, where we met the first time as a group, and we were like, what can we do? We know something needs to change, but how can we frame that? And then we had different project presentations from participants from all over the world, and then the ones you presented and Ashok presented were kind of where the process is done differently. Like what I said earlier, you know, like in Europe, like you do a design, you do a great rendering, and then you think about who's going to build it with what kind of materials. Maybe the material side now moves forward in the thinking chain, but still the question, who's building my building? And that is what I found very impressive from your projects, is that this question is basically the starting point, if I understood it correctly, of many of your design choices, where it's really about the people, the skill, like you said, you know, teaching people what kind of, is that difficult, or is that something you would say, no, in the sustainability bubble in India, everyone does that? Or is that like your angle to make it a sustainable building?
I think again, I just wrote down some things that Illya said that, you know, resonated with how we think, and he said, "Do whatever it takes," and I think I agree with that. Nothing is easy. Even I think what works for us in India is that these things still exist, right? They still exist, even though the skill is dying. There still exists a lime artisan, for example, a lime artisan that you could somehow find, but it is not the normal process of construction. Of course, we have this thing of, you know, creating a 3D, figuring out what looks really good, and then just building it. But that's not how it should be done. It should probably be the other way around, and that's what we're trying to say. That a project doesn't mean just an architect, like Illya was saying. It needs multidisciplinaries coming in, multiple experts coming in and advising us on the right things, so that we know that what we're building is the right solution, not only for today, but also for the future.
Okay, so we just have a few more minutes, but Illya, I want to, because I'm really curious, because the work you showed, you've done so much work all over the world, and it sounded like when you work like in the Caribbean or like the project in Hawaii, you do the same thing. You listen to people, you think about, you know, what makes sense culturally, who's building the building. Now you showed, and I will always come back now to that project you showed in the end in New York. Do you have a switch where you're like, okay, now for that kind of project, I do it like it's done in a industrialized, you know, country with a contractor, or is that something which you take with you and you sit down with a contractor and say, okay, look, we're going to do this differently? Now you have to be honest.
Yeah, so I'm being honest that, well, we're consultants on this. So we're brought in as architects who have an expertise in community engagement, regenerative design practices, and resilience. So we were added to the design team, and we influence the design team that has used their processes, but we infused into it the way of listening to the earth and looking at the problems, and then the community. And luckily, they brought on some extraordinary companions for this work, some that really are invested in community and culture. So I think that intelligence, at least with this design team, was already there. How much we could lean into where we go next and convince the city of New York to award that project really paid dividends, to really say, we're doing something different. And in fact, the comments from the city were, wow, this is something different. We have not seen this before. My hope is that this ups the game. Everybody in New York City that goes after this work, they look at sustainability and they look at the numbers. How do you go beyond the numbers? As Rosie was saying, how do you engage the community, invest in that, so this becomes something extra and becomes not just net zero, but net positive, nature positive, all of those pieces. So I think with this team particularly, that was easier to influence. It's not always easy. So to be honest, when you get to the contractor, you often hear, I've been doing it this way for 30 years. Great. can you try to do something different? Or that may be out of your comfort zone. And that is a hard thing to do. Very, very hard. And we've had difficulties with many of the projects because some people have a difficult time understanding what the benefit of the change is. So that language that Rosie referred to and you've referred to many times, how do we talk to not just the people who are on the ground, will live in the place, the financiers and the government, but those contractors to try to find a way, here's what I would like to happen. How can you bring your skills or labor pool or forces or methodology that reinforces that? And that's a difficult conversation, very difficult. And we've had some good success, and sometimes we are not so successful at that, and it becomes a point of friction.
Yeah, I think that's a very good closing remark. I think that translates as well very well in Germany. We know that saying as well. Well, we've never done it this way. We've always done it this way. So, and I think this is what we need to shift. So thank you to the two of you. It was so great to see you again. I'm really looking forward to see you in India, Rosie, and I'll try to convince Illya to come. Despite his very packed schedule. So we will continue that discussion. So thank you both, and see you soon, hopefully.